favourites here. First one then, of course, is probably the first execution that happened here, and it is the lady that almost everyone comes in to ask the most questions about. She, of course, is the second wife of King Henry VIII, Queen Anne Boleyn. Happened in 1536, and she was tried on 3 counts: incest, adultery, and witchcraft, because women were always witches in those days. So because of the witchcraft, she was actually set to be burned at the stake. But she begged Henry for forgiveness on this one, and he just said, "Okay, my darling, we'll execute you then with an axe." Axe executions didn't go very well though, did they? Multiple chops required to take off heads, so she was terrified of the axe. I think I would be too. So she then requested to be executed in the French manner, not a guillotine, but a 2-handed sword. So indeed now, her execution is incredibly quick, incredibly swift, exactly as she has wished. Because one stroke of the sword, head was clean off. But it had been so quick and so swift that when the executioner picked it up to show it off to everyone, her lips and her eyes were still moving. It looked like she was still saying her prayers. Now, 5 years later then, the axe falls officially for the first time inside of the tower, but for the second victim. Now, her name was Margaret Pole, and the chances are many of you might not have heard about her, and that's okay, because she wasn't guilty of a crime. She didn't do a single thing wrong. She was, however, the mother of Cardinal Reginald Pole, and that's really who Henry wants to get his hands on. The Cardinal was in Rome, preaching against Henry and protected. So Henry decides he's just going to take the mother as punishment instead. Now, that lady was 70 years old. She was the last of the Plantagenet line, and she was incredibly brave. She refused to place her neck on the block of oak, stating quite proudly, "It is for traitors, I am not such." And so the executioner panicked. He didn't know what to do. Nobody had ever refused to place their neck on the block before. So he just kind of picked up the axe and followed her around the tower. Eventually, she came to a stop, and he then used no less than 12 blows to just hack her to pieces where she was standing. Now, the following year then, I'm going to end with a 2 for the price of 1. Woo! This time it is the turn of Queen Catherine Howard, the 5th wife of Henry VIII, and her lady-in-waiting, Jane, the Viscountess of Rochford. Now, Jane's only crime is that she knows that Catherine has been having an affair with someone other than Henry, but she just forgot to tell him. So, for that crime, lost her head. Catherine, though, if you don't know her story very well in history, when she's married Henry as his 5th wife, in the hope that she's going to produce a second male heir for him, she was very young. She was somewhere, we think, about the age of about 15 years old, and Henry at this point was well into his 50s. He was overweight, he had leg ulcers, he had gout, he'd have been very smelly. It wouldn't have been a marriage of love and attraction for Catherine. So of course, little wonder then, her head was very quickly, very easily turned by a much more handsome and age-appropriate gentleman living and working inside of the court by the name of Thomas Culpeper. When the affair was found out, all 3 were sentenced to death. Catherine, though, being young and foolhardy, now believed that she loved Thomas. And as part of her final speech here on the scaffold, she too was very brave. And what she decided to say went down in history. She allegedly says on the scaffold, "I may die the Queen of England, but I would rather die the wife of Thomas Culpeper, the only man I have ever truly loved." Now, that's a bit of an awkward one, isn't it? Can you imagine Henry watching what he'd have thought about her doing and saying that? Cross does not even cover it. In fact, he was so angry, incensed, enraged and jealous that she would dare to say and do such a thing that once her head was off, he wanted to erase her from history. And he ordered quicklime to be poured on top of her grave, which dissolved both her body and her bones. We do remember Queen Catherine Howard up at the altar, but actually she doesn't have any remains left in our chapel. Right, on that very sad story, I really couldn't let you go on that, could I? I'm going to end on a much happier story, and that is about talking about us, the Yeomen Warders. Because we've been around for a really long time. So Yeomen Warders have been around since the year 1485. Some of my colleagues have been here that long as well. I only get away with saying that because I'm the youngest that's here. 1485, we were formed by Henry VII. He formed us as his bodyguards to keep him safe and protected, and we still have that duty today. So as Yeomen Warders, we're part of the royal household. We are the ceremonial bodyguard of the monarch, so most of us escorted King Charles for his coronation. In 1485 though, we did eat from the king's table of food once he'd finished, and because he was the king, he'd have had the best food, he had the best meat, he had the beef. So therefore the bodyguard ate beef to be strong, to look after the king, earn themselves the nickname, the Beefeaters. Oh, it all makes sense now, doesn't it? We don't get paid in beef anymore though, and we don't actually even know if that story's true, but that one makes the most sense. Today though, our rations are even better, because now we get given free gin instead. Beefeater gin. It's in my water bottle right now, because it's great for the local poor. So the gentleman who opened up the distillery, James Burroughs, in the late 1800s, said by way of good favour to call his gin Beefeater gin, put our pictures on the front, we'd all get a free bottle on our birthdays and at Christmas, and that is still honoured today. So I'm living my best life, aren't I? I live in a castle and I get free gin. It's amazing. As you can imagine then, there would be a long queue of people that might want my job with those nice perks. But to get my job, actually only 424 people in history have ever been appointed as a Yeomen Warder. We're all numbered, and I'm number 415 in that lineup. Today, in order to apply, we must have served a long career in the military of at least 22 years. That does now mean I'm possibly older than you think. All I can say is my hat is really tight because I just tuck everything up here in the mornings, wedge the hat on, it's better than a facelift. We also had to reach the highest ranks in our military careers as well. We're all retired warrant officers or sergeant majors if you're from the army. And we also hold a long service and good conduct medal, given to us all after 15 years of very good service, or 15 years of being a tiny bit naughty, but not caught. I am the latter of the two. My own personal story, actually, I served for 23 years in the Royal Air Force. I was actually a nurse in my military career, so I looked after military personnel and their families on the air bases, but I did spend a large portion of my career in Afghanistan, moving casualties across the skies, bringing them back home. I left the military though in March of 2020. The start of the COVID pandemic, and a very bizarre time in this world to be a nurse, I can tell you. So at that point I did decide to go work for the National Health Service. I was a sister in urgent care during the pandemic and all that craziness. And then in 2022 they opened up recruitment again here at the Tower, and I thought, well, you know what, now is as good a time as ever to apply. And I was incredibly lucky to be selected. It's an honour and a privilege to get to do this job. I love living in a castle, I love the free gin, but actually what I really love is getting to look after everybody inside the Tower, because that's our job now as Yeomen Warders, to look after you all. So thank you for letting me look after you today on your tour, and I hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody wants to come and take any photos or ask any questions. I'll hang about. If not, go and enjoy your day, and thank you all again. Thank you.